Kia ora, and welcome back to We Do B2B, the podcast by Blue Ocean where we unpick the ins, outs, ups and downs of B2B marketing here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Dale Kerner, and I'm a B2B marketer like you. From emerging trends in thinking to inspiring real-world stories from smart, good people here in New Zealand, we are here to help the New Zealand B2B marketing community to become one of the best and brightest anywhere in the world. If, like me, you're a B2B marketer looking for a place to connect, learn and be inspired, you have come to the right place. Kia ora and welcome back to the show. We have a fantastic marketer with us today, an awesome human being and a great member of the New Zealand B2B marketing community. We have Sobia Mughal from TradeMe with us in the studio here today. So in case you don't know Sobia, you should. She's got 12 years behind her belt as a marketer, 2 bachelor's degrees, the cheeky masters on top of that, and a career that spanned not-for-profit, higher education, a brief stint in FMCG, and is now B2B marketing manager at TradeMe. I came to know Sobia through the Marketing Association, where she chairs the business-to-business special interest group, or the secret ingredient group, as CEO John Miles calls them. And it's in that vein that we sit here talking today. It's about talking to the B2B audience, sharing some insight, and today she'll be talking to us on the topic of how B2B marketers can get the most out of their agencies. So welcome to the show.
So stoked to be here. Very honored. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on board and putting your name to it and contributing. It's great to have you. So first and foremost, I've given a little introduction, but who is Sobia?
Well, you've done a really good justice. I'll just say that. Who am I? Well, I'm obviously Sobia, and lots of people can't really pronounce my name, so I'm just going to get that, address the elephant in the room. Sobia is pronounced like how you would say phobia, but I promise you I'm not scary. So that's kind of a really easy, nice icebreaker for people that has never met me before. Obviously, we've met. A little bit about me, I've got 12 years of experience within B2B as well as B2C, so I've actually come from B2C majority of the time, and I kind of just stumbled upon B2B within my career. I speak 4 languages, Japanese, English, Hindi, and Urdu, which has helped in my career.
Wow.
Yeah, so it actually definitely helped in my career because it helped me bring a new perspective and a new kind of angle that normal Kiwi marketeers may not think about.
So tell us a little bit about, what do you cover and what does a day in the life look like?
Day in the life, I would say 40% of my role is very much revenue-driven initiatives, growth, and 40% of my role is product marketing. Mm-hmm. So launching products, managing go-to-markets with sales director, head of products, our account managers, and our analytics team, UX research, essentially being the glue, the connector of the business and ensuring that at the end of the day, we're taking all the stakeholders along the journey. We're working with agencies as and when needed. So in terms of how TradeMe is structured, a lot of our agency work is predominantly B2C focused, so consumer focused. TradeMe is a trusted brand, as you know. That is all very much B2C focused. And of course, the brand does help in terms of halo effect for B2B. We've only just started to scratch the surface with agencies in B2B because previously we've had budget constraint and there wasn't a particular need for it. And then we were like, why don't we use agencies for B2B?
That's a really, really nice way to kind of segue the conversation. First, I'm just going to reflect on something. I love that you describe yourself as the glue, because I think if all B2B marketers could be in that position where they're seen as the glue, we would be light years ahead.
100%.
I'd love to see that being like, the second slash on everyone's LinkedIn profile in 5 years' time. That would be awesome.
I mean, that's important, right? Like without the people element, you just cannot get any buy-in. You won't get any research. You won't hear from your customers. And if you're going to have your customer aroha up front and ensure that we're doing justice by our audience, then without that glue, it's really hard to be the connector of different departments. Yeah, I find that really, really crucial.
And in the B2B context, you're dependent upon everyone else. You need to have inroads and strong relationships with sales and product and whoever else. So,
and commercial teams to help with, what's happening in the market. It's crucial.
I'm going to look to the camera here at this point and say, make that an objective, because what you've just heard there is a fantastic career path for anyone in B2B. Do that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's segue into the agency piece. So when and where do you work with agencies when you're wearing the B2B hat?
When I'm in the B2B hat, I've worked with agencies predominantly in the paid search space. So previously in the industry and even the B2B practices, working with agency wasn't very common unless it was an external research agency. That is very common in the B2B practice, but in terms of the media agency and media buy-in, not very common at all. I mean, it is getting common now, depending on the needs and the kind of the needs of the business and resources. But in terms of what I do, I do work with a media agency to more from a special niche perspective to grow search engine marketing for us.
So if we look at some of that relationship with your media agencies and B2B, and also maybe drawing on some of your experience in the B2C camp as well, what are your main takeaways? If we were to say, what are your 3 do's and don'ts when you're working with an agency?
I love this question because I have so many thoughts on this. So
you can make it 5 if you want.
Oh no, I was having a think about it in the drive here that I wanted to distill it into 3 main themes. So the top 3 do's is, with your agency, you got to consider them as your extended team member and partnership. So at the end of the day, yes, you're giving them a retainer. Yes, you're paying them for their services, but they're not just a workhorse. They're actually a part of your team member. So if you're able to kind of go into their shoes and for them to be successful in their job, they need to have the same amount of information and insight internally as well as externally. So the first theme is all about ensuring that they're a partner, and that partnership comes from great communication, sharing knowledge 2 ways, not just, hey, how did this campaign perform? Hey, tell me how I can do for the next one. It's actually, here's what we're trying to solve as a business. Here's what we found in our research. This might be helpful to you or may not be, but it may be in the future or for context. So that partnership is so critical. And that comes in the whole buy-in process as well, because you're taking them along the journey. So they're part of a team to solve a problem together.
I love that. And certainly sitting on the agency side, that rings so true. Success is something that comes out of collaboration in this context, particularly in B2B, because the markets aren't always, there's a bit of orientation that you have to put in as an agency. So having that shared knowledge, having that appreciation of this is a partnership, let's work on it together rather than please deliver this by next week. That just sets everyone up for success if you do that right.
100%. And the second part I wanted to talk about is treat them like you're onboarding an internal team member. So you go through normal onboarding processes of ways of working, how would you like to be communicated, what's the kind of feedback loop that you like, what's the cadence of our meetings. I know it's very marketing operation heavy, but until you get those tools of success correct and you kind of sense checking their ways of working and how that could influence the companies, it's gonna get really tricky when you're in a very peak high demand place and then emotions come up and the stress levels come up. So if you've already nutted that out before, you already know, cool, this is how we're going to work together. This is how the feedback is going to be delivered and when. And that's, marketing operation, ways of working, just having those conversations up front is super key.
It's one of those things that if you remove the guesswork from the communications and feedback piece, and you know that at this point in time, at this cadence, you're going to expect a touch point, it just means that all the time in between you're not stressing.
Exactly.
Because you know it's coming, and I think if you can do that, then you kind of take some of the fear and the guesswork out of stuff happening outside of the 4 walls.
100%. Do they prefer to communicate on Slack? Is it email? Is it a phone call? Like all of these conversations, it may seem very minor, but it's actually quite important to have them upfront early on, not while the work is happening. The last theme I want to talk about is not to make assumptions and not to sit on feedback. So if there is feedback, and this is from an agency perspective and client perspective, if there's something not working or if it's the creative idea hasn't quite landed, just be honest. And rather than saying, oh, how about this and that and trying to come to a solution, just explain what the issue or the concern or the challenge is and say, it's an initial reaction. Give me a couple of however many time that you need to mull over. If the initial reaction is still going to be negative in terms of where it didn't land, why it didn't land, then we need to go back to the drawing board, a tweak or whatever the next step is. But sometimes the initial reaction when it's a bold, brave idea, you need time to let it simmer.
Yep, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Like you said, particularly if you're doing anything that's got a bit of a creative leap of faith, first impressions can be a good thing, but also you need to see if you're taking the leap of faith whether you are going to make it to the other side.
Yeah, totally. And you just got to trust the subject matter expertise. Obviously, if it hasn't landed and if it goes out in the wild and if it's failed, you're probably not going to repeat. But you've just got to trust your subject matter expertise.
So you touched on a really interesting point there, which is failure. And there's obviously that paradox that if you don't fail, you may never get to where you need to. If you don't try, you'll never fail. All of that. So how do you approach the conversation when it doesn't hit the mark or when something isn't working?
I think for me personally, I'll give you a personal example and a work example. Personally, communication to me is really important. It's just to be upfront about, hey, if I don't want to use the word like failure to the stakeholder or the person that I'm speaking with, but I would say, hey, this didn't quite work because XYZ result is what we were expecting and XYZ result is what we actually got. Here's a couple of macro, micro reasons why it didn't work. Here's kind of a bit of a retrospective of what did work within the whole project and what could have been better. And then future thinking, we'll take these learnings for future projects. So that's kind of more of a personal thing of where if it didn't work, that's okay, and just talk about it. It makes complete sense. I mean, we have the exact same mindset here that Nice.
the only thing worse than failure is never having tried. So sometimes you got to take a bit of a punt, even though it's they're a well-informed one. But failure it's a part of the process. And
100%. Innovation cannot happen without failing.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah. It's a bit of a process. So I really like those 3 do's. So I'm going to flip the question around now. And what are the categorical must avoids?
Must avoids in terms of a working relationship with an agency. I think I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I didn't really flesh on it. But don't assume that they know things. One is never have the assumption that they know the business inside out because they may have not asked, but don't assume. So I would say if there is a particular project, for example, hey, we want to do X for the Trade Me Jobs business, don't assume they know all the subcategories of our customers and our target audience. They might have one assumption, so just triple check that. Be like, hey, what do you know about Trade Me Jobs? What do you know about our pain points of our audience? Did you know X, Y, Z? And if they're confidently answering it, awesome. You've got evidence to back up that this is exactly what their understanding is and the needs of the business. If it's like, oh, I think it's this, then I'm like, oh, there's also XYZ group too. So having that like never assume mindset clarifies.
And you'd hope on the agency side as well that you've got that curiosity, or you've got that I guess lack of fear in saying we need to go through the personas. Okay, that one may be one, but who else is in the mix? So what do you do if those questions aren't forthcoming?
I think to me, a lot of the times agencies are really time poor, and they obviously have got such a strict deadline. I mean, to sometimes the client's fault, but such a strict deadline to be more outcome focused that maybe the discovery time or discovery phase have been squished, which means they've had to absorb a lot of information very quickly. So that's an art in itself, to absorb a lot of information quickly, filter in what's important, what's not, what's fluff.
Yeah, it's really hard. Yeah,
it is a huge art, I think. But if it's not really forthcoming, it's more around the sense check of, cool, this is what I'd expect. Did you understand that? Or is there a layer of information missing? Or what's a nice to know data point from an agency perspective? Is it click-through rates? Is it more around the pain points of a customer? Is it customer sentiment metrics? What metrics are important to you? Because what's important to an agency might not be important to the client, but we might have that information to give.
I'm with you, yeah. So it's about understanding what each of you are kind of using as a frame of reference.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. So what tools would you put in that arsenal? I mean, you talk about inducting an agency like you would a member of staff. So whether it's a member of staff or an agency, like what are the things from your strategy that those people must have absorbed before they're allowed to even touch anything?
Definitely the business strategy.
Good.
That is 101 marketing.
Good.
To know what the business wants to achieve, who they're going after, what are the kind of gotchas in terms of like, hey, here's a limitation of what we can't do because of XYZ. So business strategy, short term as well as long term. So within the next year versus way beyond in the future.
I think that's an important thing in marketing as well, because a lot of the tenure of marketing managers is 18 months, 2 years, which means that often when you have that changing of the guard, you don't retain the groundswell of work that's been done to support that 5-year strategy.
Totally.
And it's a real difficult thing to see sometimes.
Yeah.
Case in point, without throwing anyone under the bus, there's a cafe in town here. There's a really good cafe.
Yeah.
It was an established, it's a vegan cafe, right?
Okay.
It's pink. It's bright pink. Everything inside, the coffee machine is pink. The whole thing has been decked out. It's just changed hands. And overnight it's become orange. And it's a strange thing to reference because it may not change the outcome, but it was a cost that really needn't have been absorbed.
I have so many questions. I have so many questions. Why?
Yeah. But I guess this is it. I think this is the big thing, and it plays out in marketing manager roles as well, is that you're like, right, I've got the reins, I'm going to put my mark on it. Which in New Zealand, and particularly in B2B, it's different to if you've gone through, if you've worked in FMCG, and like the Nestle's and whatever else of the world, it's indoctrinated in you that the brand matters 250 times more than you.
Yeah.
But I think maybe in B2B in New Zealand, often it can be about making my mark and putting my stamp on things.
Look, it's going to sound controversial, but I'm going to say it. Putting a mark on your things, great, but let your work speak for it. And also, you can't do good quality work unless you've had time to absorb the environment, the people. You got to assess, what do we have, what do we not have in terms of resources, in terms of skill set and strengths. What do we not have, and where can we fill those gaps? Until you have that observation, and as a newly marketer entering any company or organization, you want to be like, cool, I want to change this and this and this and this, which is great enthusiasm. But hey, there might be actually a reason why it's not been done before. Just take a deep breath, observe, and just absorb and observe is probably the two main things before making the changes. And if it's a big change, sense check, test, trial.
And it's a good segue then to talk about the agency role.
Yeah.
Because I think when you are in that mode and you are, we've used the phrase ripping the Band-Aid on past podcasts, but if you are looking to course correct and change the nature of what you're working with, I think an agency there can give you a really, really good bit of, maybe sobering reality that says, don't hold the wheel.
Yeah.
This piece is good.
Yeah. I mean, and not every agency would do that. Some agencies would come in and be like, cool, we're going to change this now. And I'm like, that's cool if that's the need and, effort versus impact, but not everything needs to change. But if it is, it's got to be considered change.
It's so true. Change is an easy thing to want. And who doesn't get excited about a new shiny PowerPoint presentation of how the new thing's going to look? It's so easy to get, excited about. Yeah. But like you said, there's definitely more layers there. And particularly when it comes to the rest of the people that you glue together as the B2B marketer. Yeah. We touched earlier on that role of being the glue that binds. So how do you then approach, for example, if you're working with an agency and your sales team or your product team have got no affinity, they don't know who they are, how do you manage, we use the example of a big, bold, creative move. How do you manage buy-in when people don't necessarily know what you know about the agency or the people within it?
I filter a lot. As a marketeer, agency language with a client versus marketeer's language internally is a completely different language. So hence why the filter. How I get buy-in is just being upfront and transparent with your stakeholders to be like, hey, we know here's where we want to be in terms of the business. here's what we can currently do with the pot of budget that we have, or the pot of resources that we have. In order to make the most material impact, this agency can help, because that's their bread and butter. That's their special niche and subject matter expertise that we don't have the time nor the budget to do so. And even if it's part of a professional development program internally that they might want to go into, so for example, paid search, then that's going to take time, because it's an art, right? You've got to know, and you've got to be practicing it for a while. So you're actually tapping into the expertise, not just the doer. So internally, to get buy-in to get an agency on board, or to get more resources for an agency, it would be like, great, here's what I'd like to achieve, here's what I need, and if there's any kind of challenges around that, then it's like, great, let's do a test and learn approach. Give me 3 months and I'll produce X converted leads, or whatever the success metric is for the business. And if it doesn't work out, that's cool, pull it right back. So that you're lowering the risk and you're mitigating that up front. So the senior leaders are more likely to get the buy-in by doing that, because you've got a backup, thorough plan.
And you're so right in talking about mitigating risk, because always bringing in a new variable comes with risk. And I really like that approach. You're like, make it controllable.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about signing up a 3-year program with someone who we've never worked with before. It's like, no. The risk is controlled to this.
Yeah.
And we can all wear that.
Exactly. And if it's successful, great. Let the work speak for itself. That's exactly what we would do in any approach that we take, is fail fast, learn fast.
That's awesome. So I'm going to flip that and say that's a really, really solid approach to performance work, bottom of funnel, lead generate, whatever we're talking about there. If it's a tight metric, what about brand?
Oh, I love that. Okay, so there's 2 ways to look at it. Brand isn't a short-term goal. It's a long-term goal. If you have brand affiliation, if you have brand loyalty, the customers will come. But if you don't have confidence, and there's a Google article that's just been, Google research that has been published recently, is if there's no confidence in the brand, then they're less likely to repeat purchase from you, period. That confidence and the trust element for a brand is so important. And it gets overlooked in B2B so much, because B2B is always bottom of the funnel because of the lack of resources, right?
Yep.
B2C, it's always brand, consideration, conversion. B2B is like, don't have resources for the top of funnel. Let's drive all our resources in bottom of the funnel. And you know what? Sometimes for short term, it will work. But if we're thinking long term, you gotta come up the funnel.
I'm so with you on that. Even for all the research that gets published, the 95-5 rule and everything else that goes with that, it's still B2B businesses, I think, not necessarily the marketers, but the broader businesses themselves, they still have a way to go in adopting that.
Yeah.
But it's ironic, because when you talk to a salesperson, there's nothing that a salesperson hates worse than turning up as a stranger.
Yeah.
Having to pitch that, having to just bash their way through the door and explain who they are and justify it. And I'm sorry, it's expensive, but what you're talking about there is build the trust in advance, and that piece actually just happens.
Totally agree with you on that one.
It's not that the race is run, but certainly that trust factor is a huge component of good and successful B2B marketing. And
the brand also comes with, how do you affiliate with the brand? What does this brand make you feel? So the important part, and this is very, very similar to B2C, but again, at the end of the day, B2B, we're marketing to human beings. B2C, we're marketing to human beings. They will resonate and feel this very similar thing. So let's just get that out of the way. And so what I was going to go with that thought was, in B2B, what the brand makes you feel, if you affiliate that, oh, this particular brand has given me value and made me do my job better, or made me look good in front of a boss, or made me develop my career, or made me processes and platforms that's easier to do my job, that's immediately a positive affiliation towards the brand. So if you can articulate that in your value messaging or positioning, you're halfway there.
I couldn't agree with you more on that.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, because in B2C, it's almost enough to have an emotional claim. Coke is refreshing, I will drink one.
Yeah.
But what I see sometimes in the B2B context is that people have the emotions. Of course they do.
Yeah.
They're human beings and you cannot switch it off.
It's not enough.
They'll always second guess. They'll always try, well, I know this feels right, but how do I justify that? Because of that, that classic sort of 3 quotes mindset of, oh, okay, it's lovely that you want to work with these guys. What are the other guys priced at?
It's because of the investment. It's because of the risk factor, because in B2B, traditionally, the consumer life cycle stage is longer. The decision making is longer.
Yep.
There's a lot more touch points and untrackable touch points that we as marketeers will never see. Like, you won't see whether I've gone in Slack and spoke about a brand. I'm like, oh my God, this amazing brand, blah, blah, blah. Like, no one told me to do it. I just did it because I noticed it and I thought it was great. And I talked about it, and that immediately is untracked, that conversation privately or WhatsApp conversation.
Yeah.
So it's in B2C, it's very different because depending on the product that you're selling or services that you're selling, it's very short term, like you consume the good and then you feel great about it and then that's it.
Job done.
Yeah.
You don't
B2B,
have to,
it's harder.
It is.
Yeah.
And particularly because you kind of have to sell across the boardroom table, I love all of the stuff that comes out of the B2B Institute, but when you look at things like the 95-5 rule and that split, the 60-40 split of long versus short, all of that stuff, it's all well and good, I think, to try and saturate the market and make sure that everyone who's around the table has got that same emotional affinity. But it's also unrealistic a lot of the time.
Very unrealistic. Yeah. You cannot please one particular crowd and not the other. So you've just got to be confident in your decision and see what's best for you and the company's goals. And maybe it's calculated risk.
Yep.
So you've just got to work closely with the commercial team to kind of see impact and effort.
I always think of it as appealing to the head as well as to the heart.
Yep.
Because people have this almost innate response in business-to-business buying, which is, I've got a gut instinct, but that's not enough.
Totally. It's like, is this going to commercially make sense?
Yeah.
What is this going to look like? You become very calculated.
You almost have to give them the weaponry to justify to everyone else why they're feeling what they feel.
Oh yeah, like a template of here's how you can get a buy-in from your boss.
Well, that sounds like a lead magnet.
Yeah,
a great piece of lead gen work. Let's do that.
A lot of people do that out in the world. I think I was approached by a couple of software companies, and it was I downloaded a report, and they were like, "You've downloaded a report," and I'm like, "Yep, I did." And I think a couple of weeks later, I got an email. Here's a template to take to your boss if you want to use us ever. And I'm like, good on you for trying.
Yeah. I mean, there's 6 more of you in my inbox today, unfortunately, and I'm going to put all of you in spam. But
totally, exactly. But good on you for trying, because out of the however many people that they've sent, one might convert, and that one conversion might be worth millions. You never know.
Exactly. It's definitely a long game with some of that stuff, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of like working with an agency in the B2B context, do you find that there are differences in outlook between do people get the B2B mindset, or what are the gaps that are kind of missing on agency side?
Oh gosh.
And maybe
what a juicy question. Very juicy and very controversial, because I have thoughts on this. It comes down to education and exposure. As graduates in any educational university or any polytech or wherever you get information from, you get taught marketing. You get taught the creative B2C, like integrated marketing approach, and the really fancy agency stuff that B2C do a really good job on. What they don't get taught is the full spectrum of marketing, unfortunately, and that's where they're lacking in terms of B2B mindset. And therefore, universities and schools have pumped out capable marketeers geared more towards B2C because the theory of B2B isn't taught. And I'm not a big believer on only theory, don't get me wrong, even though I'm an academic nerd. I'm a big believer of take that theory, put it into practice, and then use that to marry them two together. So what I don't see in B2B agencies, well, agencies in general, is within the agency, and maybe it's because I don't have that much exposure, so it could just be a personal me thing, is that they don't really see the complexity of a B2B audience or pain points or the internal struggles that a B2C would. So I think there is a little bit more educational process involved as a client. But having said that, it's really hard to context switch.
I know exactly what you mean in terms of that. It's a different mindset. There's a lot of crossover, but it's at the far ends of the bell curve that it's so wildly different, I think.
Yeah, like you might be talking to the same people, or you're using the same channels, because B2B customers are also commuting on their phone and using social media or whatever. But it's just a different long-term game versus a short-term game.
I hear what you're saying. I'm just going to pick up on the academic piece, because I know that, like we said earlier on, 2 bachelor's degrees and a cheeky master's to your name. You've obviously learned and absorbed a huge amount of information and learning and research. Where would you direct someone who wants to get up to speed fast with what good B2B marketing looks like?
Honestly, shadow someone in a corporate organization, get your hands dirty, volunteer, go speak to a B2B marketing, get mentored. Yeah, so definitely go and talk to a practitioner in B2B and see how their day-to-day is like. Can you follow them and shadow them for a little bit? Or just have a coffee catch up. Shout them a coffee for their time and talk about what that looks like and what kind of transferable skill set you need to be a B2B marketer and how different or similar it is. Because I'm not saying B2C marketing is better or B2B marketing is better. I'm just saying they're different and for rightful reasons.
Yeah, and go and worship at the altar that you need to, so to speak.
Go get exposure is what I'm saying. Go get educated is what I'm saying. You don't, and some of the theories that you do learn in the university, very transferable skills, like communication skills, you need that everywhere. Presentation skills, you need that everywhere. So there's certain soft skills you do get taught, which is very much transferable. Otherwise, I guess I won't be here.
No, that's true. But what I also pick up on in all of that is a bit of hustle.
Oh, yeah.
Like going and knocking on the door and being proactive and going and actually chasing that rather than,
You've got to be curious. You've got to have hunger.
Curiosity and hunger, it just makes, they resonate so strongly with me. I've always considered myself someone who's curious, and it's a trait that I really value in other people.
Nice.
Particularly from the agency side as well. Like sitting here with the agency hat on. That first kind of month and a half, 2 months, when you're like going through this learning curve like this and absorbing all this information, man, that's the fun stuff. Like obviously
discovery is the fun stuff. I love discovery, as even for a marketer or client perspective. If there is like a problem to solve, and if I have time and space to do the discovery work, boy, I can get so much kick out of that.
I'm with you. I'm completely with you. So again, talking about some of the education piece and then access and exposure. You chair the B2B Special Interest Group at the Marketing Association.
Sure do.
Tell us a little bit about what led you to doing that. What were your drivers to being in that seat?
There's 2 main motivation for me. First of all, beginning of my B2B marketing career, I would look at my personal development growth. So I went in from a 50-50 role at the University of Auckland, where I was actually 60% B2C, 40% B2B. And then I transitioned into the tech space for full-time B2B. And I'm like, oh, it's a different muscle that I'm using, which is great challenge. But I need to quickly learn and develop myself and learn from other peers. And then I Googled. And I didn't get much in New Zealand. There was great conferences and great learning opportunities in UK, in the States. In terms of product marketing, they really got it nailed now. We, as New Zealand, we haven't quite gotten there yet. We're getting there slowly but surely. So one of the reasons, and when I Googled, I came across the B2B community SIG group and Marketing Association. I'm like, oh, I can't get an education course, I can't go to a conference, that's cool. I'm going to go tap into this. Joined it as a member, loved the fact that I was able to speak to other B2B marketeers in different industries, different roles, different seniorities. I learned and gained so much more from that conversation than I would have in any other matter. And I'm like, I'm really passionate about this space. So what I'm going to do next is influence the B2B marketing community in New Zealand, and that's kind of what led me to where I am.
both with the Marketing Association and sitting here in this room. You know, it's I have so much respect for the time and energy that you put into that group. And now that I kind of understand some of your backstory as well, yeah, it's an awesome thing that you're doing there and across the board.
Oh, thank you. And it's not just the marketing community, it's also keeping that academic lens on. So to give you an example, I'm very active in the research and marketing space. So I've got connections within the University of Auckland, some in the Massey, and I like to offer my services, even if it's voluntary, to be like, hey, I'd love to talk to your students about X, Y, Z. And that next week I'm talking about B2B marketing at the University of Auckland, which is going to be great. So like, I like to keep active in the academic space too. So not only is it just peer level, it's also from a junior graduates level too, because I'm just passionate that B2B marketing needs to be known as a career pathway, as a successful career trajectory, because it's not right now.
I'm completely with you. You know, we work with the University of Waikato down here, and they do a great job. And you know, it's a fantastic degree, the ones that they put on down here. But again, the B2B marketing piece is like, it's like the poor cousin. It's like, you know, one module, or not even a module, it's like one lesson out of the module, so to speak.
Do you know why that is? Like, I'm asking you because I have an answer for it, but I reckon it's because B2B doesn't get mass exposure. Our work in B2B isn't for the mass audience, so we don't get seen in that space.
It's so true. You know, you can work. It's actually one of the things that I love about B2B, though, is that, you know, you can be working with someone who is an absolute giant in their field.
Yep.
But the office next door has no idea what they do.
Yep. Exactly.
But I think it's part of the challenge as a B2B marketer, and even as an agency. If you want to do work that everyone in the country knows, don't work on, you know, lawnmower blades.
No, don't work for an industry-based partner.
Absolutely. So it would be really good to try and champion, I guess, and create some visibility around what good B2B marketing looks like, because there is some really good stuff in New Zealand. And
100%.
We have businesses here that, you know, every so often this thing just bubbles up onto your radar and you're like, oh, look, there's another world leader. Oh, look, down in Dunedin, they've got 73 employees and I'd never heard that they existed.
So cool.
But I think, again, that's part of the challenge for New Zealand in the long run, because with a market of 5 million, often for B2B businesses, the market ain't here. It's build a base here, validate here, and then access overseas. But then the challenge that you have with that is that you're going into markets like you were talking about, where they're much more established, they're much more advanced in product marketing and RevOps and everything else like that. So I think B2B feels actually critical to the success of some of our most exciting and fast-moving companies.
I agree with you on that. Like, if you even just Google product marketing in New Zealand, you'll only see tech marketeers, which, I mean, yes, that's standard. But you don't see product marketing in many other industries outside of SaaS. And that's just really sad.
Sad for SaaS.
Yes. Yeah. Sad for SaaS?
No, I think that's the wrong way around.
Yeah, I'm like,
it's sad for everyone else.
Yeah, sad for everyone else. Sad not for SaaS.
yeah, SaaS has got it all kind of like down pat. Like, it's definitely the most established, I think.
Yeah, correct. But product marketing is one of the key foundations of B2B marketing, you know, like if you can't launch a product to your customer who has the longest lead time, what are you doing? Like, brand awareness is great, but like, you also need to have that product marketing skill set too. So it's got to be hand in hand. It can't just be siloed.
And that's a difficult part, I think, of working with an agency in B2B. Like you said, you've got long sales cycles. The work that you do now might not bear fruit for 18 months. And even then, that might just be starting a conversation, which is scoping and research.
Yeah, there's a difference between marketing qualified leads and sales qualified leads. There's different criterias. Yeah, correct.
But that's fantastic. Are there any other sort of thoughts that you'd want to share with the audience here around the topic of working with your agency, getting yourself up to a level where you can, or, you know, helping them?
I think the top tip would be, if you're not getting the best out of your client to do your job, ask. If you're saying, hey, I can't meet this deadline because here's my blockers, just be honest with your client. Like, I know that agencies sometimes like to hold themselves like, oh, must deliver and we'll do it. And a bit of a tall poppy syndrome sometimes, but just be vulnerable and say like, hey, I'm afraid I can't get this done because of X, Y, Z. And then the client can actually help you prioritize and say, cool, this has a bigger impact, this one doesn't. So if we had to reshuffle it, here you go. And from a client perspective, whoever's watching, if you need, for example, a report by the end of the week, explain why, give them context so that they can go in the journey with you. So for example, I recently asked for a report from our B2B agency and said, hey, I need a report because I'm about to go pitch to our senior leadership about XYZ campaign. And so if it's successful and if it's going well, hopefully in the future, I can get more buy-in or budget. So, give the why you need it.
Yeah, not just Thursday afternoon, can I have it tomorrow?
No. Unreasonable. Unreasonable. But once in a very rare occasion, it will happen, and that's okay.
And if you understand that as well, then, as the agency, you just haul ass and get it done.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a habit thing, then...
But you're absolutely right that understanding breeds appreciation. If I can understand the context that you're in and what you're trying to achieve, as opposed to kind of have a report, which from the agency side is like, oh God, red flag, what are we doing wrong? Then I think that's definitely the foundations for a good, solid relationship.
Totally.
And something that can carry both of you forward.
And it's not the agency's fault if something goes flop. Depends on what it is. But it's also like, hey, these metrics didn't quite land. It's probably because of the macro economy, or, it's election time, or it's XYZ time. So it's not the best timing to spend on this channel or that channel. So having that understanding and layer as well, it's just really good to have that.
Completely with you. So we'll wrap that up. I mean, thank you so much for coming in and joining me today. It's been a really, really interesting conversation, and I think for anyone who's in the B2B seat or new in the B2B seat particularly, I think there's so much to take away from what you've said here. You've got things like building a relationship and a partnership with your agency. I love that approach of treating them like an inducted employee and making sure that they're empowered with knowledge and that they're empowering you with knowledge. But that goes both ways. Again, I really, really like the approach of de-risk some of the way that you pitch it in. When you're working with the leadership team and they don't have the proximity to the marketing speak and all that stuff, just remove the risk and make it easy for everyone to have a crack. And then the one thing that stands out above all of this is let the work do the talking. So is there anything that you would ask of our audience that we haven't covered off in the conversation here? Anything that would help client-side marketers or agency-side marketers get further and faster?
Great question. I'd love to know from the audience, what are the tools or topics in B2B marketing, whether you're thinking about a career in B2B marketing or whether you're in the B2B marketing community, that New Zealand is lacking? Because that's something we can influence as special interest groups and marketing association.
So what you're hearing there is customer insight driving outcomes, and that's like the tenet of everything that we should all be doing as marketers. So that's a fantastic answer to that question.
Had to put the plug in there, get some customer insights.
Where would we be without them, hey?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That's that. Thanks for listening to We Do B2B by Blue Ocean. Now, brace for CTAs. If you want to join and grow the community, make sure to subscribe wherever your eyes and ears absorb information. Don't forget to switch on notifications so you know when the latest episodes drop. And for more B2B goodness, be sure to follow Blue Ocean, the B2B agency, on LinkedIn. Now look, you know how this next piece works. The more reviews we get, the faster this thing grows. So please do for us what you hope your customers would do for you. Leave a review and share your thoughts. Let's stay connected and keep the B2B marketing conversation going.